When it comes to adapting a classic TV show to the big screen, it doesn't get much better than Andrew Davis's The Fugitive. Indeed, the third highest grossing film of 1993 proved to be a monumental, critical, and commercial hit that earned more than $370 million globally and was nominated for 7 Academy Awards, including Best Picture. In addition to Tommy Lee Jones winning an Oscar for his indelible supporting turn as U.S. Marshal Sam Gerard, the film still boasts some of the most impressive action set pieces and stunning practical effects on record. The movie succeeds on multiple levels as a riveting manhunt thriller, an engrossing murder mystery, a compelling redemption story, an FX-driven action adventure, and of course, a faithful TV adaptation that both honors the spirit of the original and also pushes the narrative forward into daring, unpredictable territory. Yet, for as nearly perfect a film as The Fugitive remains to this day, you would never guess that the production actually had a slew of hurdles, injuries, cast and crew replacements, and other major mishaps to overcome. As the landmark action-packed crime drama celebrates its 30th anniversary, we're about to dive into all of the little-known facts about the production and figure out just what the f*** happened to this movie. Believe it or not, Harrison Ford was not the first choice to play Dr. Richard Kimball, the revered Chicago heart surgeon who was wrongfully accused of murdering his wife in cold blood. Several actors auditioned for the role of Kimball, including Alec Baldwin, Andy Garcia, Kevin Costner, Michael Douglas, Dennis Quaid, Christopher Reeve, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Robert De Niro, and so many more. At one point early in development, Walter Hill expressed interest in directing the movie with Nick Nolte in the lead. However, Nolte declined on the grounds that he was too old to make such a demanding action movie. Harrison Ford reportedly actively sought the role because he was interested in playing characters drastically different than himself. He also had the desire to sport a heavy beard and mustache, something that became a problem for Warner Brothers chairman Robert A. Daly, who wanted Ford to show off as much of his bankable face in the movie as possible. According to Ford, the studio was not happy with the beard. They figured they paid for the face they wanted to see, so they were concerned about that. It was director Andrew Davis's idea to have Kimball start the film with a beard and shave it off, rather than wear silly disguises as the movie progresses. A brilliant decision that adds to the film's sense of stark realism. Although Jeb Stewart and David Thwowy are credited for the screenplay, the script took 5 years, 9 writers, and at least 25 drafts to complete. Everyone from Robert Mark Kamen and David Newman to Walter Hill and David Giler worked on the script. Hill and Giler had a draft ready to shoot in 1990 with Nolte in the lead, but the film was put into turnaround at Warner Brothers after roughly $2 million was spent in writers' fees, where it languished until Coppelson sent the script to Harrison Ford's agent. Not only was Ford always Koppelman's first choice to play Kimball, but he also handpicked Andrew Davis as his first choice as director. Once Ford read the script and agreed to star in the film, he met with Andrew Davis after going to see Davis's previous film, Under Siege. Ford thought the film was a solid action-adventure film and supported Koppelman's decision to hire Davis to direct The Fugitive. As such, Ford was the first actor who signed on to the project. Despite the efforts to get the script in perfect shooting shape, it's worth noting up front that much of the film's dialogue was actually improvised by Ford and Tommy Lee Jones. Constant rewrites were made while the film was being shot, including the third act, which had to be entirely reconceived. According to Koppelman, the original ending included Gerard in a vehicle chasing Kimball down a subway train track, which was too far-fetched and cost-prohibitive to make. Before Jones was cast in the part of U.S. Marshal Sam Gerard, Gene Hackman and Jon Voight were offered the part, but turned it down, while Mel Gibson was also considered. As for Kimball's duplicitous colleague, Dr. Charles Nichols, actor Richard Jordan was initially cast. Tragically, Jordan fell ill after filming a few scenes with Ford and was forced to drop out. Jordan was subsequently diagnosed with a brain tumor and sadly died just 3 weeks after the film was released. As a result of his sudden illness,
Dutch actor Jeroen Krabbe was cast to replace Jordan during filming, which is quite astonishing considering how believable he is in the film and what a major role he plays. Despite Davis making 3 films set in Chicago in the past, it was actually Ford's idea to set the film in the city. Both Davis and Ford were born and raised in Chicago, and even though Davis was intent on using a different location, Ford felt that the director made such good use of the city in his previous films that he insisted on setting The Fugitive there. Strapped with a $44 million production budget and Warner Brothers' blessing, principal photography for The Fugitive commenced on February 3rd and was completed on May 15, 1993. While most of the film was shot in Chicago and rural Illinois, a large portion of the movie was filmed in North Carolina. Some scenes were also filmed in Blount County, Tennessee. The prison bus transport scene that occurs early in the film was shot in the Great Smoky Mountains outside of Dillsboro, North Carolina. Of course, the scene leads to the most memorable sequence in the movie, the all-time exhilarating train crash, in which a locomotive slams into the prison bus after it rolls down the hill and lands on the tracks. Believe it or not, the sequence was filmed in a single take and cost $1 million to produce. Because of this high cost, Davis had only one chance to get it right. As such, extensive logistical planning went into the explosive wreck, with the FX team spending weeks preparing by doing practice runs with a boxcar and log carrier. Although the engine had been removed, a real train car was used when it came time to film the harrowing train wreck. After scouting 5 different states for a functional railroad that could be used for the scene, Dillsboro was chosen. 11 cameras were strategically placed around the crash site to capture as much footage as possible during the one single chance to record the shot. It was actually cheaper and more cost-effective to use a real train, which cost $21,000, and practical effects rather than miniature models and expensive CGI, which was still in its infancy at the time. Co-producer Peter McGregor Scott came up with a method of pushing the locomotive and prison bus on the train tracks from behind in order to get speed and momentum. The tracks were engineered to split into 2 different directions. The driverless train was brought to a speed of 35 to 42 miles per hour and equipped with an explosive charge in the front bottom. When the train makes contact with the bus, it bursts into flames and pushes the vehicle down the track for 300 yards. All of this was done for real, without a single ounce of artifice. The train crash actually made contact with one of the large VistaVision cameras from 40 feet away, which took over 2 hours to dig out from piles of debris. Shockingly, the footage was still intact and unharmed. The camera used to capture Kimball's POV from inside the bus also survived the crash and continued to film for 7 or 8 minutes after the fiery explosion occurred. However, 3 additional cameras were completely destroyed during the blast, and the footage was never retrieved, much less used in the film. Even so, it's truly one of the most remarkable and genuinely enthralling action set pieces ever committed to celluloid, and the fact that the train crash was all done in a single take is nothing short of a miracle. Now over to the screenplay itself. It's true, many of The Fugitive's most iconic scenes and lines of dialogue were often written on the spot, just hours before they were filmed. Despite the painstaking efforts to get the script in tip-top shape, the movie is laced with improvisations. For instance, the Chicago PD interrogation of Kimball was completely ad-libbed. Ford had no idea what questions would be asked of him, and he responded off the cuff and in character. Again, the spontaneity adds to the realism. Jones, who had worked with Andrew Davis in The Package and Under Siege, had a very comfortable rapport with the director by the time they worked on The Fugitive. As such, Davis completely trusted Jones to rewrite scenes on the fly and ad-lib dialogue when seen fit. For instance, the classic "I don't bargain" line was written by Jones after deeming the original scene's dialogue flat and unconvincing. Furthermore, the pivotal moment where Gerard traps Kimball in the sewer tunnel and says, "I don't care," after Kimball declares, "I didn't kill my wife," was Jones's idea completely. According to producer Roy Huggins, the original scripted line was, "That isn't my problem." Furthermore, Jones also came up with several humorous lines in the film himself, including the classic bit to his subordinate Newman in the woods. "Well, think me up a cup of coffee and a chocolate donut with some of those little sprinkles on top, will ya?" According to Davis, Jones wrote the oft-quoted quip on the morning the scene was filmed. Once Kimball escapes from the train crash and dashes through the woods, Ford injured several ligaments in his knee in real life. Ford refused surgery until filming wrapped and incorporated his injury into the film. This is why Kimball is seen limping for the remainder, most prominently when he's running. Later, Gerard pursues Kimball through the sewer system and seemingly traps him high up on the water dam in one of the movie's most iconic moments. The tunnel that Gerard chases Kimball through was actually a set built by the production team, with traps that could open up and let natural light pour in from above. Davis insisted on using as little artificial light as possible to maintain the movie's authenticity. Meanwhile, the production only had one day to film at the actual dam. As such, rather than spending weeks building a set inside the dam, the crew built a section of the set on a pivot that had the pipe and tunnel and placed it on the back of a flatbed pickup truck. The truck was placed on top of the dam and driven to the edge, rotated, and extended over the lip of the dam. This allowed Ford to stand at the edge of the dam with the real background behind him. Ford had a safety wire running down his leg that connected to the lowest part of the sewer pipe and attached to his belt, allowing him to feel safe and comfortable enough to stand so close to the edge. Once the shot was successfully recorded, the crew simply drove the truck away from the dam and were able to leave the location without spending too much time or resources. To film the shot of Kimball leaping from the dam, 6 dummies that cost $12,000 apiece were used, with one appearing in the long shot during the final version. Meanwhile, Harrison Ford was filmed in a swimming pool in California. Ford lunged from the diving board while wrestling with the camera underwater, a quick insert of which is used in the film. In fact, Ford was so gung-ho to do things himself that when it came time to film the ambulance escape scene, Ford did all of the driving himself with nobody but a cameraman inside with him. It speaks to how collaborative the filmmaking process was, how dedicated Ford was, and how much Davis trusted his collaborators. With the North Carolina locations filmed, production moved to Chicago where most of the remaining scenes were shot. In addition to Deal's Gap, some of the dam scenes were shot in the Chicago freight tunnels. A major reason the film was shot on location was to make it as realistic as possible. As such, the intense chase sequence where Gerard nearly captures Kimball in City Hall was genuinely filmed in the Chicago City Hall of Justice, which doubles as a police holding center in the movie. The chase ends with Gerard firing 9 shots at Kimball into a bulletproof plate of glass. For the scene, wax bullets were shot from a large air pressure mechanical firearm. The gun was placed over Gerard's shoulder while Jones was simultaneously firing blanks from his prop gun. According to McGregor Scott, wax bullets were loaded into electrically charged cylinders with precise laser sights used to accurately hit the target. Once Kimball narrowly escapes Gerard's bullet-laced assault, he immediately wades into the St. Patrick's Day parade outside in downtown Chicago and uses the large crowd to blend in and lose the marshals. Believe it or not, St. Patrick's Day parade was not part of the script and was totally improvised on the spot. Before delving into the logistics, it's worth noting that to create the constant needle in a haystack theme, Davis often used aerial overhead shots of the city as a visual motif to emphasize how difficult it is for Gerard and the U.S. Marshals to find one human being in a vast sea of humanity. This idea was reinforced in the sprawling parade scene, which was filmed during the real St. Patrick's Day celebration on March 17, 1993. Because the parade was not in the script or on the production schedule, a day's worth of filming had to be done by early in the morning on that day, so that the remainder of the time could be spent on the parade. Nothing was staged or rehearsed. The entire sequence was captured live, on the spot, using a Steadicam to follow Ford and Jones after they literally walked into the crowd of marchers without warning or preparation. According to Davis, It was all dependent on two things. Michael Chapman, the DP, had to be ready with certain camera positions, and Steve St. John, who's this incredible Steadicam operator who I've worked with on almost all my movies, able to run around in freezing cold and keep up with the foot traffic. Indeed, the weather while filming the parade was a frigid 21 degrees Fahrenheit with a wind chill of -6. Even so, the effort was completed without many problems and ended up being a fun way of working for Ford and Jones. Additional key scenes filmed in Chicago include Kimball meeting with his old friend, Dr. Kathy Walland, played by Jane Lynch, in County Cook Hospital. While the real CCH was used, Lynch has corroborated how much the script evolved on set. According to Lynch, Ford didn't like their reunion scene as originally written and reworked the dialogue together with Lynch on the spot to make it more believable. Oddly enough, the original script incorporated a romantic angle between Kimball and Walland, although it was ultimately scrapped for time and pacing issues. It was also deemed inappropriate for Kimball to be romantically involved with another woman while trying to avenge his dead wife's killer. To this effect, the reason why Julianne Moore has such prominent billing in the movie is that her character, Dr. Ann Eastman, also had a much more prominent role in the original drafts. After confronting Kimball for tampering with Joel's chart at the hospital, Kimball goes back and seeks help from the young doctor and eventually falls in love with her. Scenes involving this subplot were actually filmed but discarded from that final version. Despite such a minor role, Moore scored a role in Steven Spielberg's Jurassic Park: The Lost World based on this performance. Ironically, Harrison Ford turned down the original Jurassic Park to make The Fugitive. Of course, it's hard to talk about The Fugitive without mentioning the unforgettable score by James Newton Howard. While ultimately nominated for an Academy Award, Howard had a notoriously difficult time coming up with the right tone and tenor for the film, saying, "The Fugitive really kicked my ass. When I was hired for it, I was terrified." Howard laid temp music over the film from legendary composer Jerry Goldsmith as a placeholder until he came up with his own. However, he became so depressed over the daunting task of creating music on par with Goldsmith that he resigned to the belief the score would be a quasi-failure. Howard never gave up though, and despite feeling as though the string instrumentation during the chase scenes in particular were more awkward than thrilling, he was grateful to receive such positive recognition, adding, "I was completely shocked. I just didn't think my score was worthy of a nomination." But that's often what happens. It worked, and the movie was so good. It makes everybody look better. One thing nobody ever talks about regarding The Fugitive is how historically fast the editorial turnaround was. Although the film took 73 days to shoot, Davis was given only 10 weeks to edit the film, due to Ford's restricted time and availability to promote the release. This meant that Davis had from May 15th to August 6, 1993 to completely lock the picture for release, including the edit, sound mix, color correction, and more. To achieve this monumental feat, Davis hired a whopping 6 editors, and McGregor Scott secured 7 editing bays at Warner Brothers, and they began to work around the clock to shape the film into what it's become. For their superb efforts, all 6 editors were recognized with Oscar nominations. Most importantly, the film did not require any reshoots or release delays, and remained on course for its late summer theatrical release. The rest, as they say, is cinematic history. Without droning on about the universally acclaimed post-release plaudits the film received, that's essentially what the happened to The Fugitive. Although the film had to replace its original cinematographer and its central villain, despite Harrison Ford suffering injuries while filming, in lieu of rewriting scenes and improvising dialogue on the spot, and even having only one chance to capture the breathtaking train wreck scene, none of these external factors made much of a difference in the end. Andrew Davis, Harrison Ford, Tommy Lee Jones, and the rest of the supremely talented cast and crew overcame whatever production hurdles came their way. Perhaps most impressive, the editorial manpower allowed the film to hit the masses less than 3 months after filming wrapped. All combined, The Fugitive remains arguably the best cinematic adaptation of a television show
ever.